This is the Samsung UN65KS9000 4K Ultra HD Smart LED TV. This is the 2016 model. This particular version is the flat screen model, 65 inch. They also make a curved model as well, but this is the flat screen model. Now, included with this set, they have the metal stand, which you can see attached there. Of course, the power cable, some plastic cable management pieces, a wall mount adapter, which I don't have here, the batteries, screen cleaning cloth, instruction manual, remote control, the One Connect box, which I'll show in just a second, and the cable that attaches to that. For me, one of my earliest complaints here with this is the included manual with this is terrible. As it's brief with very little instruction. It's more of a quick setup guide, and it's not particularly that good. Luckily, there's a better online manual available on Samsung's website, and actually one on the TV itself. Although the one on the TV, it's a bit difficult to kind of reference that and set up the TV or do some adjustments at the same time to solve an issue. I do think both e-manuals still lack a little bit of details, such as the voice command information. I think it's pretty lacking in that respect. As you can see, the included stand here is a metal one. It's a good sturdy 3-leg stand. It's pretty sturdy, but unfortunately it doesn't swivel at all, so you really don't have any swivel motion for this to adjust if you want to adjust the angle of the TV. Now, I've personally been looking at a variety of 4K TVs for a while. I found that, you know, the best time to typically buy is right around the Super Bowl, and when this particular TV dropped to under $2,000, that's when I grabbed it. Now, my previous TV that I use here at home is a Sharp HD TV. It's about 6 years old, so going to a 4K TV really makes quite a bit of difference in picture quality. I can definitely tell the difference right away. I will say though, in some respects, that I like my older Sharp TV in comparison to this Samsung in some respects better. I'll get into that a little bit below, but style-wise, I like this TV. It's a nice looking TV. It has a sleek design. It's near what you'd call bezel-less or near bezel-less. There's very little, frame around the screen, so that's nice. It looks good in the room has a nice looking stand with it as well. Now, for me, I found the initial setup, and let me hit the little Smart Hub screen here, they call it, is easy enough, as the TV automatically pairs to its unique looking remote, which I'll show you there. It automatically pairs. It walks you through the initial connections and setup. And for me, it's actually been one of the easiest setups I've seen on a TV, minus some issues that I have that I'll get into in just a second with the network and firmware updating issues. Now, although I said originally that the setup is pretty easy, it wasn't without complications. One of my initial frustrations with the initial setting up with the operating system on the TV is the problems I had initially connecting my TV to my network and the issues with upgrading the firmware. Although the Samsung website doesn't indicate that there's a firmware update, the TV initially told me that there was an update to version 1165 as of the time of my review here, and asking to update. Now, normally downloading directly is, for me, I think is the best way to go, but it took really several tries and nearly all day to finally get the update downloaded and installed. For some reason, the firmware would stall out and stop, or just exit to the setup screen. Again, I fall back to tech support with Samsung not being that good. I called them. They really weren't aware of an update, couldn't send me the update because I was hoping I could either download it or get it emailed so I could install it via USB. and it appears that Samsung's not really keeping up their website to download with the latest firmware and the firmware history log to tell you what the bugs are being fixed and what features are being added. And again, that's customer service reps of Samsung's not even aware of that stuff. So I later discovered as a fix to this is that if you see that it stalls, you stop it and then quickly restart the download, and it tends to resume from the last percentage it was stalled at. And I finally, but it took several tries, but I finally got it to get to 100% and actually install the firmware. Now, the one thing I did have to do with this as well is I had to actually unplug the TV after the installation and get it to fully restart and reboot because for whatever reason there were some bugs that didn't get cleared until you did that. So I assume that the stock firmware that came with this was the main problem with my network and firmware updating issues. The current firmware seems to be more stable in that respect, although I still do have occasional connection issues with the TV. Again, the tech support for Samsung's kind of hit and miss. I called for not only the firmware issue, but a couple other questions, and I really never got anything other than scripted answers. Now, the remote control here, let me show it again, is one of those things that I have both a like and dislike to. It works as a universal remote here. It works as a universal remote, and it's pretty easy to get synced up to not only the TV, but the different devices. You just point it at devices that you're connecting to the TV, and it recognizes the frequency. But like with my HDMI issues with my audio receiver, the remote didn't work for the audio receiver either. So I'm not really sure what's going on. I like the remote in some respects that it's designed well for navigating the smart hub. As you know, you have a home screen button which brings it up on the screen, and this rotating wheel that kind of looks reminiscent of what the Apple iPods used to do, that allows you to scroll and makes it easy to scroll through and look at the different things you want to in the menus. But on the other hand, it's small. The remote is small. It has limited features. It lacks an actual number pad. There's a virtual one on the screen. I don't really like that one, which makes changing the channels on a cable box kind of a pain. I actually find it easier to use the standard cable box remote for watching cable TV than to use this remote for that purpose. I also wish it had some additional features because, you know, it lacks DVD controls, recording controls that I think would be easier if they had additional buttons on here and make it far more user-friendly. One downside to using the cable box remote, though, is the volume control isn't as efficient because you have to hit to raise and lower the volume of the TV multiple times on the cable box remote versus this. You just hold up or hold down to change quickly the volume. This is what Samsung calls its One Connect box, where you basically most of the slots, as you can see here in the back, most of the slots for the different connections, including the 4 HDMI connections. On the side here, there are a couple of USB connections, that kind of stuff. Most of the connection ports are on this box instead of on the TV itself. Then there's a proprietary cable, which you can see right there, that Samsung uses to connect to the TV. And initially with this, I'm not so sure that I like the One Connect hub. On one hand, it makes it easy to kind of put where, you know, the cabling and manage the cabling and hide it pretty easy with this box. But on the other hand, I find that if you kind of move this box a little bit or slightly, you know, touch it, sometimes it affects the HDMI connections. And so it's a little flaky, I think, in regards to that. Now, one of the main features of the box is that it automatically recognizes the devices plugged into the HDMI ports. And I have a cable box here, a Sony Blu-ray, a Sony audio receiver that I have connected into the different HDMI ports, of which one of my issues with this is, although this is technically 4 HDMI ports, only 2 of these are really true HDMI. One's a DVI to HDMI, and one's an ARC port, which is mainly for audio. So keep that in mind, that if you're connecting more than a few devices, you may need to use splitters with this anyway. I think at this price, there really should be some more true HDMI ports on this box. And so it automatically recognizes when you plug devices in, and that works for the most part. It found my cable box and the Blu-ray player with no issue. For some reason, it seems to have a problem with my older HDMI receiver, my Sony receiver, which is HDMI. I don't know if it's because of the fact that it's an older receiver, or there's something issue in terms of firmware for the TV or something like that, on why it struggles to recognize that. The only way I've found to be able to use the audio for the TV itself, other than using it with the Blu-ray player, which it works fine for, is to actually use an optical cable. So I'm not real crazy about that. I'm not really sure what the issue is with that, and I haven't figured it out, and Samsung's technical service really isn't very helpful in regards to that. Although it's a little hard to see down here, I'm not real crazy about the power cable that's plugged in here. It uses like a type of magnet, and the one thing I found is that it's too easy to knock off and fall out of the back of the TV. I really would have preferred a more secure connection to the TV than this magnetic plug. There are, again, it's kind of hard to see because it's dark back here. The TV does have a few other connections actually built in. There's a USB port, an X-Link port, a LAN, and then the One Connect slot that's here in the back of the TV. So even though this has, plays through the audio receiver with the Blu-ray player, another quirk that I found, at least with my receiver, is that for some reason it doesn't automatically always shut off the central speaker of the TV. So sometimes you get echoing in regards to that, and I'm not exactly sure again what the issue is, whether it's dealing with the firmware of the TV or whether it has to do with the older receiver. So a lot of times you either have to turn down the volume all the way down to 0 to stop that. This has a mute on it, but one of the things I don't like about the mute, as you can see, it flashes constantly if you put the TV on mute. I don't like that. I would much prefer that it would be off in mute mode and stop that completely. Once you put it on mute, it shows you it's mute, and then that's it. So I don't particularly like that. So now, as I said, the smart box here automatically detects when you attach a new device into the HDMI ports. And that can be slightly annoying, because the one thing that it does is when you do that, it automatically switches to that device. So say you're watching something on TV, you plug in something else because you're putting the device in for later use, it automatically switches and turns on that device. The other thing I'm not particularly crazy about is the last device that you have on. If you're using the remote that came with the TV and turn on the TV, it turns on that last device. Which if you want to watch that device, that's fine. But if you want to watch something else, that means you're going to turn that device off and switch to the other device. So I'm not real crazy about that automatic detection for some things. As I mentioned, the HDMI ports, again, are not all true HDMI. So you have to use a splitter. Now, keep in mind with this TV that this does not have any composite plugs at all. So any older devices, DVD players or legacy devices that use composite or RCA jacks as they call them, will not be usable with this TV. Now granted, since this is a 4K TV, it's not a huge deal because if you want to use devices that get the best quality picture out of this TV, but it would have been a nice option to at least have that capability for older devices. I mean, a lot of circumstances you spend a lot of money on a TV, you may not want to spend right away for a 4K player or other types of devices that have those features. You have to go with kind of what you already have. So that to me is a slight issue. Now I have a Logitech Harmony remote that this works pretty well with. Although again, it kind of depends on what you're using, which remote tends to work better for what. The other issue with the remote is the buttons don't glow in the dark. They don't have a backlight, so they tend to be hard to see in low light conditions. And as you can see here, this has a unique microphone feature that you hold down the button and basically can say different things into the microphone to get the TV to do different things. I personally have found that this to be a bit spotty in how it works. Play YouTube. So as you can see, it does go, when it does work well, consistently it'll do what you ask. I just found it not to be as efficient as like Google or Siri. I kind of wish that electronics manufacturers would kind of take those voice control systems that those brands use and use those instead of trying to invent their own, because I really don't think that they work nearly as well. So I think the voice recognition can be a bit spotty. I do think that the remote itself is too small as well and a bit flimsy, and the one thing I found is that the back tends to come off too easy at times. One thing I wanted to mention too as well is the audio for a basic TV is actually pretty decent. It's actually better than my old Sharp TV. I mean, it's not going to blow away a surround sound system, that's for sure, but the sound is pretty good. Apps wise, it has a lot of the popular different apps here. At least, it's not perfect. There's some that are missing in terms of what some people use, but it has most of the popular ones. And again, it's pretty easy to navigate with the remote, and the apps tend, for the most part, work pretty smoothly. There's some lag sometimes, especially with playing YouTube videos or something. I think my Blu-ray player does a better job than the TV, but it for the most part it works fine. I do like the channel preview screen that works with my cable box that has a preview of the channels that you can see what's on the different channels, although that's fairly limited in what channels you can see. For the most part, as you can see, I think that the TV has a nice picture. It's a really good quality picture. It's sharp, bright, colorful. It handles motion good with no blurring. I don't use it for gaming, but it handles fast motion well. I think it would work fine for most gaming applications. Now, the one thing that this TV doesn't have, and it seems to be a trend with newer TVs, is it doesn't have 3D capability. For me, that isn't a big deal because I can count on the number of times on one hand that I've used the 3D feature on my Sharp TV that I have. But if you're looking for 3D, this particular TV doesn't have it. One small irritation that I have at times is sometimes it doesn't seem to remember the custom screen settings, such as when I expand the screen to eliminate black bars, it sometimes forgets that setting and goes back to the default. Overall, I like this TV. It's not perfect. I have some complaints, mostly with the firmware and network issues and some of the lack of compatibility with the older devices. I still like the TV for its best feature, which is its really great picture. There should be some design improvements, especially with the remote and the One Connect hub. But overall, this is a great looking TV, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars.